excuse me, items 5 and 6 under that one section of the agenda. So let's talk about operating our own fire department, the pros and the cons of that. So what's on all y'all's mind?
That's a very general question.
Yeah, specific to this page.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh.
And so,
Well,
so,
not to digress,
okay,
because that's certainly going to happen, but why are we here? Pros and cons of operating our own fire department. I've been asking since the onset of the sit downs and the board meetings and everything is why we are at the point we are here today. And the only one viable reason that anyone can come up with for me is money. So
yeah, I mean, I don't, I guess it's a little bit, I don't know when all this sort of started to manifest itself. I think it was sort of pre-me.
mhm.
And so I don't know if there was just a them and us kind of look at things, or if it was a turf war, or if it was a personality clash, or if it was financial based. I don't know exactly what got us to a place where we need to talk about 6 different ways to operate one section of a municipality. So I don't know. I suspect looking at it from the standpoint of the finances of a municipality, it would appear as though there's been an ongoing struggle to reconcile a dollar amount to a fire department. And I don't know that that's that unusual to any municipality that has a fire department.
Correct.
And so I suppose if we look at it strictly from a financial standpoint, it's that not being able to live within the means of the village. And so we know that as we got to the place where we were having this ad hoc committee formed, and we know from our very first meeting of the ad hoc committee, where we in effect went down these 4 items that we're pro and conning about now, the original 4, not the 5th and 6th. We determined that it is worth our effort to put as much thought into this as we can to try to operate our own department as we look into the future, not only today, but well into the future, as to how we can do it. And that's ultimately why we're at this table. But the genesis early on, I don't know. I don't know if Cash, if you can shed any light on that or not.
I don't know. I want to move forward, whatever that may be, but I think if we need to be able to seriously look at the pros and cons or what we're doing now, if it's the right way we're doing it. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that critical thinking, I think, is a good thing for us.
Every healthy organization rethinks the way they've been doing business. Period. I think I'm not into change just because it's been 2 years and we need to change. That's not, but the budget is probably what started it, obviously. But rethinking the way the township does business, I don't think that's any different than subcontracting out the water department that's now there. I mean, that's a major rethinking of the way the township is doing business. We used to have, was there 2 or 3 people in that water department a few years ago? Now it's a contract and the controlled costs. Everything in today's world, everything, everybody's budgets are so tight. Economy of scale, if you have more and more, the bigger a department gets, the more efficient it can run. So we can't run a water department nearly as efficiently with 2 people or 3 people as a company can that has 35 employees or whatever that number is. So I think you're right, Dave, in saying budget is what got us here, because the fire department has the township, and let's blame the township board. The board has never truly done an exercise like we did the last several months. What does a fire department our size cost to run? Nobody has ever done that exercise in this township before, have they? I mean, and I think it's proven fact because we've got villages that aren't enough. I mean, that ticks me off. You know, if that exercise would have been done several years ago, we would know where we stood. So the budget is what got us here, but I think we've got to quit looking at the rear view mirror. We can't, fire trucks don't have rear view mirrors, right?
Yeah, they do.
Not rear view mirrors.
Not on
inside
the windshield.
Not in the windshield. They got side mirrors. That's so you can keep it peripheral. Look
Well,
forward.
that's because they're too big. I do have a camera that faces backwards.
There.
So-
Technology has taken that whole line out now.
No, I agree. My point being is, and I'm not, that's why I said not to digress, because I know we always get into that. Why are we looking backwards? We're looking forward. And I agree, every healthy organization should rethink, but I'm just trying to illuminate to you guys, there's a big difference between trying to rethink the operation daily and annual operations of your department from a department head standpoint. There's a huge difference between rethinking it, trying to reimagine it, making it run more efficiently. There's a huge difference between that and just having somebody come in and say, hey, we're shutting the doors. And every time I bring that up is when I know there's that big divide between us, because when I bring that up and people are like, well, don't live in the past. And I'm like, I'm not living in the past. I'm sitting here right now in this minute because that happened. And the only explanation anybody can give me is money. So where I'm coming from is as a municipal entity, if we're having number one, is it the township's goal that we have a fire millage and that is solely the purse that we operate out of is the fire millage? And I think you all have kind of answered, and the board have said, well, no, nobody has any objection to an amount of money coming out of the general fund, because that's always been, I mean, that's why people pay taxes. I think if you go out, even the people that say I'm not in favor of a millage would roll over and say, well, yeah, but I do expect a portion of that I pay in to go toward fire services. I don't expect a wholly separate millage just to operate that department. And that's why I asked that one question first.
So I think you're still, it doesn't matter where that millage comes from. If you want to call it a township millage or a fire millage, it still all comes out of the township taxpayers' dollars. It doesn't really matter what it's targeted for. If the township would have taken the fire operation, that's at 1.5 that we're talking about. If they would have just worded that for township, we'd still be talking the same thing. We're still living way beyond our means. The budget as a whole for the township isn't there. We're not replacing, we're not fixing any roads. If we had a developer come in here and want the township to be able to help expand our water department and put some sewer in and put some roads in, because front page of the newspaper today is that we're short of housing. The only logical spot, it's not gonna be the city, it's gonna be the township. There's no land in the city. We have no money. Alpena Township, I said this before, we're damn near broke. We have not stayed within our expenses have way outseated what we think we want to tax our taxpayers on. That's our problem. It's all the same pocket, Dave. And, you know, are we taking it out of the general fund or are we taking it out of a fire millage? That
Yeah.
doesn't matter. It's all this, you're just playing.
No, I agree.
You're
That-
just playing a shell game, and that's what ticks me off. It's a
Okay.
shell game.
And that's my point, is because I'm here, I'm telling people what it's costing it from a department head standpoint. What's it cost you to run that department? 3 mils.
Right.
Since the day I stepped in the door. And then so I hear back, well, that's beyond your means or your millage
Well,
or whatever.
I think we
And-
also got ourselves.
And I'm like, well, people, if you stop and think about it, if you live in the township, you are paying 3 mils for this fire department. It's just that it's coming out of two different purses. People that are saying, I'm not gonna pay 3 mils for fire millage. And I'm like, you already are. It's just that
Yeah.
one's going into the general fund, the other one's
The
coming from
problem
the
is
millage.
the
so-
other departments are suffering drastically because of it.
Because of the fire department,
Because the township's not billing us enough.
right?
They're not taxing us enough.
Which leads me to my, is, because I used the flat tire analogy before is, and I think we're heading in that direction. Don't get me wrong, but and whether it's my fault or not, but it seems like from a township standpoint, municipal standpoint, my simple question, quite simply, is if the department has a money problem, why aren't we educating people and taxpayers to the fact that we have a money problem and this is what it costs to run the department. This is why we're gonna ask for more. This is what we're doing with what we have. Why did we just automatically grab the meat cleaver, off the counter and go cut? We don't have any new roads in the township. I will solve that. Fire department's gotta go.
But there's still no money, even doing what has happened, there's still no money for roads.
Yeah. And I was gonna say, I don't think it quite went down quite like that. From my very first time looking at the budget, now I guess this would be coming up on my third year, I guess, looking at the budget. It was pretty clear to me strictly from a financial standpoint, okay, not looking at it in any other optic, that we were short of funds in order to adequately run the entire township. And so when we dissect it out and when we look strictly at department by department by department, it became even more obvious that the area that we were underwater was in the fire department. And then what began to become clearer to me was the false sense of revenue on the non-emergency transports. And I think that's where we got a little bit sideways, that the revenue stream from this enterprise was floating a part of the part of the fire department that was going to pick up the slack between that 1.5 and the 3 mil. That's what I kind of concluded from a lot of this, was that we don't really need that extra money because we've got this pile of money coming in over here. And it was never clear to me that there was any real revenue stream from that area. Clearly, there was revenue coming in, but there was a significant amount of write-off also. And then when I start to look at what does it cost, ideally, I would have liked to have known what it cost to operate that ambulance by the mile. But that was a very, very difficult task. I'm sure it could be done, but my brain doesn't have the capacity for that. And so I think that was also that sort of problem that was manifested there. And I think that once we started to pull back the layers of that onion, I think it agitated people. There's no doubt in my mind that it agitated people to the point of you're taking a significant amount of my personal income out, and I get it. That's a tough one for anybody to have to deal with. And I think that aided to the cascading of just the collapse. That's what I think. And so, notwithstanding the financial side of things, I think that it was a whole host of those issues that just caused the personnel to lose interest. And was there a personality clashes? Absolutely. Well, do I wish that wasn't ever part of any level of discussion? Absolutely. It was, and it will probably continue to be. It's hard to get out behind that sort of personality things and any operation unless you just have a great crew. But we are where we are, and there's not much you can do about other than learn from the past, is to bring that forward into anything that we talk about. And so would I love to have one of the very top things of communication way up there? Yeah, that'd be great. Is it a reality? Not always, you know. Well, as human beings, I suppose we tell people more often what we feel they want to hear as opposed to what they need to hear. And so now we find ourselves in these uncomfortable places where we have to make decisions. And as I've said on more than one occasion, we are also finding ourselves in a place, and like Chad had talked about, the economy of scale. We will find ourselves in that place. It may not be today, it may not be tomorrow, but we, meaning municipalities, will find ourselves in that place where it will be out of absolute necessity that we begin to consolidate efforts. It's just a reality. I don't know how you get outside of that.
The business
reality.
world is already doing it.
I just don't know how you get out from underneath
Right,
it.
right.
You
The business
can't
world
keep-
is already doing it. I mean,
You can't
every
keep-
industry has buying
Well,
groups
and-
and all of that stuff.
And this industry, the municipal quote unquote industry, has its taxpayers to support its operational stuff.
Right.
And so if we say, hey, taxpayer, we need another 4 mil. So it's only going to cost you X number of dollars, based on $100,000 and blah, blah, blah. Well, then you run it out for 25 years and it costs you a whole lot more than that, because the cost of that home is going to continue to go up and so on. So people are going to get fatigued with that. And I think we see some level of fatigue now with the taxpayer. Even though economically speaking, we're probably better off than we have been in a number of years. years, still, there's this level of enough already. Do something different. Think outside the box a little bit. So we're here. We're here. And we have to deal with that reality. And so I'd like to sort of bring it back around, and I appreciate your thoughts, Dave. I truly do, because I know that history is an important element of looking into the future. And so what can we do to remedy those sorts of things? And I don't know the answer yet. And I don't know that I'll know the answer this week or next week or 2 weeks from now or 3 weeks from now. But we have to go through this exercise. And so therefore, I'd like to come back to the pros and cons of operating our own fire department. Dave, unless you've got something else to add, because I don't want to not hear things.
Oh, no, in a roundabout way, specifically my point for bringing that up is and whether it's incumbent on me or us as a township is I would like to see more effort put into the pros or why we're trying to save the department and continue to operate it, as opposed to we've got a money problem, so we're just looking at the biggest part of the ham shank. I mean, I admitted to that several meetings ago. I see where the department is as a target because it's the largest department in the township. Ergo, it's going to be the largest part of the budget. I'm just wondering, I mean, are we following the norm and a national, or I would say a statewide model? What's usual and customary now that we're in we're in COVID times? Are all the municipalities that are in the same boat as us we've got money problems, so we're all targeting our fire department because that's the biggest part of is that the norm we're following, or are we going to put out there, make an effort to set some parameters and educate the public and say, that this is what you have, that we see very hard times ahead because not only of COVID, but of some other things that have happened. And if you want to continue that service, this is what we have to look at. So
Well, I think I guess the answer would be yeah to all of that, because I know that we'd take a look at, I'm in perhaps a little bit more of a unique place because I've dealt with municipalities for 35 years. And COVID or no COVID, discussions usually take place at the budget time of the year where we have to start looking at ways to trim things. We have an example of it we have an example of pension plan legacy costs. Fortunately, the township does not have pension plan legacy issues. I am confident that municipalities that are in the defined benefits programs are going to find this to be a huge problem, huge, notwithstanding anything that we're talking about now. If you think about if this fire department, for example, had that kind of a pension plan, this would be a significantly more compounded problem, because even if we disbanded the fire department, those legacy costs continue. And so we are very fortunate in that regard. And so kudos to the prior boards for not stepping into that big pile. Presque Isle County, we know, literally passed a millage, but they're asking the taxpayers to support people's retirements over and above what they'd already done. And so now they're hoping that the investment plans will help carry that. and there's no guarantee there either. So do all municipalities have to go through these exercises? Of course they do. Is it reasonable that higher cost departments get picked on more? Absolutely it is. And so it's not just a municipality that has to deal with that. Any organization, as Chad has said, that has high costs of operation in various departments, they're obviously going to look at those sorts of things. And so
while we're talking about that, not to get off into left field, but you just rang a bell with me, because 4 or 5 years ago, when I first stepped into that chair or office and we were doing budget talks, one of the things I pointed out that alarmed me is we have no line item, segue, whatever you want to call it, for, I would refer to it as unfunded liability from the fire department side, exactly what you were just talking about. And I don't think that's ever really been addressed and that is a huge.
We do have liabilities.
we do not have-
Unfunded liabilities, for instance, like, and you guys should have noticed it, for instance, like when Bruce, Ken and John and Tom all left at the same time. Did not the budget take a huge hit for paying out that's what I consider unfunded liability? We weren't prepared to pay out, that all that severance, separation pay, PTO time that was owed them, et cetera. So you see what I'm saying?
But as they leave, I mean, they're fairly short term. He's
Yeah,
talking,
and that
he's-
would certainly have been a liability to the township,
Right.
not per se a legacy cost.
Right.
But we
Right.
did manage to work on the PTO. I think you could address that.
I'm just saying, I agree with Steve. It would have been, had it been like defined contribution,
Catastrophic.
defined benefit, I think would have hit a lot harder.
Much harder.
oh,
So,
yeah.
I'm going to chime in.
Okay,
I think it is still very, very important. I understand we're not living in the past. I
Right.
think if we're looking at what it sounds like it's boiling down to the fact is it's financial. Okay. If we don't completely understand what those financial concerns as a whole, we can't fix them either. So as Dave said, keeping that in mind to be able to fix it, we have to reflect on that. I'm not saying that's the perfect or that's where we need to be, but we have to keep that in mind. The thing that I'm questioning is, and Cash, you have alluded to this a couple times, the mission and the vision. So number one, what is the mission and vision of the township as a whole? Number two, what is the mission and vision of this department that feeds off of that? Is where especially if we're talking about running our own department. Because how we run that department and how it's structured should basically come from what our mission and vision is, correct?
Mhm.
So that's where I would like to see if we're looking at, we're going to run this, well, why are we running it? What's our mission to run it?
yeah, we talked about the mission of specifically the fire department, was to provide fire services, and basic medical first response. That's what the charter is, right?
That is what's required of us, as far as I know.
And so there was nothing that required us to do, for example, the medical non-medical transport. There was nothing that talked about that. And so I believe that I suppose we as human beings, I guess we kind of take the path of least resistance sometimes. And so what was, and so does that mean that we push it forward? I know personally that I kicked myself a little bit because I was not as aware my first budget year. And when the request for the 2 ambulances came forward and the striker power lifts came forward, I did make an assumption that that was just sort of part and parcel to the operation of the fire department. And I've subsequently learned that we would have been much further ahead to simply buy a couple of Suburbans or something like that. Much, much, much further ahead. And that bothered me because had I known that that there was nothing in a mission statement that required us to do that, I would not have voted yes to spend that kind of money on something that was used to operate outside the window of what we do. And so I would have absolutely voted no on that. But again, I can only learn from the past. I can't change it. And so ultimately we started having those discussions about what do we do? What is our mission? And at the basis of it all is fire and medical first response. That's our mission. I think the medical first response has more to do with being in concert with the ambulance millage that the county has, right?
Right, with their agreement, our tiered system, I should say.
So that's the genesis of at its base. Am I right, Dave? Am I
No,
stating it okay?
Yeah, no, I agree. I actually was, my gears are turning as you're talking and I'm like, well, now that I wasted 45 minutes of your time from my backlog. I guess what as a department head, what I want to say to this committee is I haven't just simply stated it before, but what I would like to see, for one thing, I want to, not trying to blow sunshine at you guys, but thank you for all the time you've put into it. I think some good things are coming out of this committee. And I see it getting, I see things getting better. The committee, I think, certainly has grown from, when we simply were meeting at the south side to it's a lot more structured and thank you for, the leadership in that. Back to what I'm going to ask this committee as a department head is I've been asked a lot for, we want to plan, we want to plan, we want to plan. Can I see what I would like to see come back is, may I have some parameters, please? I'm more than happy. I was that kid. You throw some Lincoln Logs or Legos in front of me and I'll play with them all day. I'll build all sorts of stuff for you. But I need to know, am I playing with a 200-piece Lego set or a 2000? So I would like to see from us sitting down and doing this exercise, what our aim is. And right now, I think I can narrow that down to, as Bev and you just alluded, is to kind of retreat back to our basic mission statement, which is number 1, fire, and number 2, at least at a minimum, medical first response, EMS, in accordance with the way the system was built back in '92.
I think we got off track.
And move forward with that. But I sat down in the office and come up with all sorts of different plans, but I don't know. I don't know what's in the parameters. I don't know how wild you want me for, and I'll just give you an example and then we can move on, Steve, but, having just said that you felt that and other people feel that the non-emergent transport business was kind of a red herring. I'll just say I disagree, and we won't go down that road. But having said that and moving back, part of my, I provided you guys with some informational stuff, but One of the things I included with a plan for the department moving forward is some of the feedback that's come back to me is people people implying that there's really no validity, no valid point or to send in some MFR and basic EMTs on scene first. That, you know, when people say, well, you know, I don't care what it says on the door, or why send 2 EMTs when I can get 2 paramedics? And then we know the answer to that. The answer is back when the system was designed, it was designed to be tiered, because there are parts of this county that you simply can't get an ambulance to in 4 to 5 minutes. But part of my thing was is if that is a priority for people in the township, it's really not going to take a lot of effort or time on our part to, we could at very least, whatever type of apparatus we end up with, be it, you know, Tahoes, Suburbans, mini pumpers, that we could be leaner, we could be limited advanced non-transport, which would give us a little more leeway on the scene. We, you know, starting IVs, dropping airways, stuff like that. To people that are in it, you know, suffering from the higher acuity calls. But I don't even want to go down that road if the feedback coming to me is, well, you know, is that part of our mission statement? Or are we simply trying to provide medical first response?
Yeah,
So-
so I know that when we talked about this, we talked about sort of going back to basics. And then once we've figured out basics, and
Then
if
try and
there's an
move forward again.
opportunity to move forward, then at that particular point in time, we should consider moving forward. But we shouldn't create this Goliath again if we can't feed Goliath.
Exactly.
And so if we have people that, I don't know, let's look in our crystal ball and we go back to basics, and the fire department is operating within parameters, and now there's an opportunity because of whatever economic change in our community, or what something has happened, the average age has changed, who knows? And now the taxpayer is saying, we want more. And at that point, then you can start to say, well, if you want more, it's going to cost you more. Are you willing to foot the bill? And then ask the taxpayer for that. But I think this is the problem that we've walked ourselves into, is that we knowingly don't have enough to support the department. So why would we want to spend outside our means even more? So let's find out what people ultimately need by pulling in our horns, operating within the charter of the township, and then expanding upon that at a point in time where you can afford to do it, or at least you can explain it to the people. See, I suppose we can all sit here and explain to people, you know, the reality of economic life, that we miscalculated the fire department, blah, blah, blah. And then people will generally agree with you. And then when it comes time to go behind this box, they won't agree with you because they're looking at their checkbooks.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. And so education is clearly key to all of this sort of stuff. And so we just can't, we guys still have to try to operate in a manner which is consistent.
Yeah. And I'm hopeful that this fiscal year that we just started bears
Sweet.
that out. That, I mean, two things. One is that as you guys identified, as far as the non-emergency transport, that's a moot point because that problem's been taken care of. That effectively will cut our call volume in half, if not more.
Yeah.
Which I think would reflect a substantial, I mean, if you want to do Reaganomics trickle down effect, that means less fuel, less maintenance, less man hours. So we're gonna see the effects of that down the road.
part of
And-
my bigger concern to some of that, although we're effectively starting from scratch, is that we don't have this perception that you just took away X number of dollars from my income. I think that agitated a lot of people.
Yeah, yeah, I did, and again, not to go, but I don't, because I it's no surprise to you guys. I mean, you sit here and watch me, and when certain things are brought up, I get a little bit pinchy and knee jerk and stuff, but I don't think a lot of people realize that, for instance, the year that the millage was renewed, and that then we got the extra 0.5.
Yeah.
That to that point, the prior 3-4 years before that, we had been receiving like 300,000 out of the general fund to operate. So that year I get a millage that says, okay, you're gonna get another, 265,000, and then budget comes back and I see the general fund contribution was then reduced by 200,000.
Yeah,
And
well,
that leads us to the old discussion is, yeah, I'm gonna make this blanket warmer by cutting the foot off of one end and sewing it onto the other. So I'm sitting here and I'm like, and people are like, well, you got the 1.5 and you got, and I'm like, okay, a buck is a buck is a buck. It's like daylight savings time, 10 hours of daylight's 10 hours of daylight. I don't care what time you call it.
Well,
but-
earlier I mentioned that I didn't think that the way that we allocate money by taxation, I don't like the way we did it. Okay, and I think that there's a better way to do it. That looks at, as Chad has said, the entire bucket of the township, because we do know that millage money is earmarked for the fire department. We know that. And we know that the equipment is earmarked for the town, for the fire department. We get that. And then the rest of it is earmarked for everything else. And so to the taxpayer, it's all dumps into the same bucket. I don't think they recognize the reality of the average taxpayer is not going to know.
And they
that
don't,
huh?
Nor do they care.
and they don't.
care.
You're right.
The only thing that I care about is in July and in December is I have a tax bill due,
Right.
and it's a heck of a lot of money. I really don't care how it all divides up, because the county can say, well, this little portion, yeah, we're collecting it, but it goes to the library, or
Yeah.
this goes to this. Nobody cares.
No,
Nobody
you-
looks at the line.
I agree, and that's why I just want to explore something. I'm just not prepared to talk about it because I want to explore as to whether or not it's even worth talking about. It might not even be able to do it. And so I think it'd be a more equitable way of distribution of monies. But I want to learn more about it before I jump in. Dave, unless there's something else, I want to get back to our task at hand. And I'm sure that we all can come up with some options. I want to go through the exercise because I said we would go through the exercise, and then we would somehow PowerPoint or do something with it to get it up to the board. And so I also want to stay within our timelines, because otherwise we're going to be wasting unnecessary amounts of time without staying on task. So give me some reasons why we should keep this fire department active.
We'll meet the mission and the vision of the
Okay.
department and the township.
Obviously, another pro would be that we would have operational control.
That was the one I just wrote down. Thanks, Steve.
What's that?
I said I just wrote that down. Thanks.
All right, let's use these noodles. They're there other than to hold glasses on our heads.
I think economically, we're providing jobs, money to the community through that, I think that's a benefit.
Well, and agreeable, we all agree that the Raymond Robson report is that any of that empirical data that was collected is now, I'm the 5-year, once it's out 5 years, it's obsolete.
Was it 2007?
And it was a 2007 report, but if you read that report in its entirety, something that I'll point back to that report other, because I was going to say, in my opinion, but even Raymond Robson stated that, and this, in 2007, you got to remember that the EMS arm of the township fire department had only been operating for 2 years at that point, but their statement was for the amount of money that the township was spending on the fire department, you were getting one heck of a good fire. You were very, very effective for merely having 6 full-time people and 30 paid on calls. You were getting a lot of bang for the buck. I think they were, their point being is that they were surprised at how well a small combination department like this was able to provide that. So the obvious point I'm trying to make is I prior to the first year, and obviously we hemorrhaged some people, which is a concern. But prior to that, I think you had a very productive department that was providing a very, very needed service to the community. So we can continue to do that. So
I'm hearing you basically say that value added to the township by.
That's what I was gonna say, is it's providing a higher standard of living for us as residents.
That's kind of like where I was going to go with it. Is the fact is that we have local community services and we have buy-in from local. So if you're part of that community and you live and you're invested in that community, you tend to have a little bit more passion behind what you do.
well, yeah, and again, when we all know that the 32 corridor is the growth spot, has been for several years. When I went out to the National Fire Academy to do the community risk reduction program, and one of the things they taught us is when you want data on your community, and growth is not necessarily to run down to City Hall or the township offices. They taught us, they said, if you want the most up-to-date information, go to Home Depot or Meijer or Walmart, because they don't just throw darts at the board and say, we want to build here. They come into the community and scope it out. They want to know, do you have, full-time fire service? Do you have volunteer? What type of infrastructure do you have? And they do the demographics in the municipality too. So you can believe that Home Depot did demographics in Alpena, not just Alpena, but they probably included portions of Alcona, Montmorency, Presque County, to see what kind of base they were going to draw from and what type of infrastructure and services you provide. And whether it affects ISO ratings or not, I can't help but think that they're more than encouraged when they find out that a municipality of this size has a full-time department standing. But that's just one checkbox in a whole big long list. But they look at that and take note. So, and the infrastructure that was at city and now extends all the way out to the airport, I think is a huge part of that. I mean, obviously they wouldn't have been able to build out there without it, but that's one of those things they look at.
Of course, yeah, I mean, yeah, these guys are pros at what they do. They're not just gonna build something just because they have some extra cash. All right, so let's keep chugging along. I suppose on the con side, we could obviously put down not currently operating within the village. I suppose we can be somewhat redundant in some areas, and although really not a con per se, we have increased operational costs, just which tie into the millage, because we still have to pay the pension plans, we still have to pay the health insurance, we still have to pay all the other things that we are currently doing. Again, I'm not sure I would see that as necessarily a negative, as I would see that as a cost of doing business. And so I hate to commit that to a negative thing, because I don't really see that as a negative thing. I suppose we could just put down that there would be an increased cost of doing business as a general blanket statement.
Steve, I want to bounce back up to one of what I would, and help me
Okay.
understand, under one of the pros, could we not list the simple fact, and I think it's been expressed. If we have our own department and we're supporting our fire services and we're providing our basic with a third party, and you listed in the cons with up and combining, the fact is the potential increase over time. So is it a potential, the fact is that a pro for having our own department is, if another entity were to say, okay, well, we can no longer afford to do it at this price, so we're going to look at you and, well, now you got to give me more money, and then you got to give me more money, and then you got to give me more money, to the point is then all of a sudden, well, we can't afford it, and we have absolutely nothing to fall back on to provide those services, and then would have to rebuild.
Well, yeah, that has been a concern of mine from day one.
So that's what I guess is what I'm trying to say, is we should probably put that in the pro.
Yeah, I'm not sure how to word that.
That's why I said, help me.
I suppose you could make I'm not exactly sure how you would write that in as a pro, except to make it a negative, a negative positive, to that if contracted services became unaffordable. I don't know how you turn that into a pro, because to me, that's one of the key components of all of this, is that I would be very concerned that unless you had an agreement of some sort that was locked down price-wise.
Like Alpena Township did with the city with the water department, that proves it's
Well-
not to be lockable. That's my challenge with a contract with anything,
So,
is they are breakable.
well, of course they are. And so, but you can have very long-term escape clauses too.
And that's what the township was missing.
It's not
Before.
now.
What it was.
And
Right.
so,
Well,
and so
still
if
not
I
signed.
liken it to a water type operation, which is, as you all know, I'm involved in as well. There is specific language that keeps both municipalities in the sandbox together for a long period of time. And so we're not talking about things like this fire department issue. We can't be talking about things that are a few years long.
Right,
We
so,
have to be
so
talking
maybe
about things
the
that are
con
very
that you're
long-term.
trying to figure out a positive, it becomes a con on contractual services are limited by the contract. That's a con. It doesn't necessarily become a positive on running our own
No.
department.
No,
It's a con on the other side of, if we went to a contractual agreement, the con is limited by the contract language. I mean, and that can be length of time, that can be sunsets, it can be all of that stuff. Is that what you're trying to?
Yeah.
think that's what you're
I
trying to
totally
say.
get what she's trying to say. I
Right.
just don't, I
don't think
know
it's
how you
positive
make it.
on
I don't know how. you-
operating on the system.
Yeah, we put that into the other one where the very first item was, many unknowns in the current agreement. And so, I don't know how to, Bev, I don't know exactly I hear exactly what you're saying, and
I don't want to bait and switch and then all of a sudden we have nothing.
Well,
as a
yeah,
township.
because I wouldn't want to put ourselves into any kind of a situation where,
But that's a major negative on the contractual side of things.
Okay,
well, and I suppose that a pro would be that if you wanted to really narrow it down, is we're not bound by contractual obligations.
I'll take that.
And that'll have to have some conversation, because just as a statement, it doesn't make any sense. And
No, but-
so- And so, because obviously we have contractual obligations, we have employment obligations, we have, cost obligations, we have all these other contractual sort of obligations. And so I suppose if we put into in a parentheses,
Organization.
your contractual or it's a hard one to sort of put into a little box.
Right.
You're welcome.
And I'm following along the lines of the conversation here, the contractual obligations would be more of a burden on whoever is looking at fulfilling that contract. That's open both ways. I think I brought
Oh,
this up at the last
absolutely.
meeting, that if I mean, if it truly would behoove the township, I mean, if it was truly a positive thing for the township to contract fire services out, please make sure that when you're building that contract, that you put your specific requests.
The township has to build that
In-
contract. and
Correct.
Sign a written contract provided for them.
Correct.
So
Yes.
again, I said this before, and I'll say it on a recorded. I'm not opposed to a contract. I'm not. Again, as I said earlier, it is inevitable that every municipality will have to address these issues at some point in the future. And so if we do find out that the economy of scale is to our benefit, then how do we structure that in such a way that it truly is to our benefit? And so enough said on the mat, on that subject, but you're absolutely right, Dave, that if that is a direction that we have to seriously look at, then we have to seriously look at the language of that contract and how we fund that agreement. You can't just find an arbitrary number and just stick it on the wall. It doesn't work that way. It won't, because again, these are long-term agreements. These will outlast us as agreements. And so what does that look like 20 or 30 years down the road? And do we find ourselves going, geez, kind of wish we wouldn't have done that one,
Or wish we would have.
or wish we would have, absolutely.
In my point, just to speak frankly, and I know Chief Forbush and Deputy Chief are here, and I don't know what the rules are for business. But I think my statement would be, for example, if you enter into a contract that leaves manning of the stations open-ended, I think would look a lot different than a contract where if the township specified, we want those stations manned and dedicated,
All
you know,
of that
to
stuff.
the town, I'm guessing those two proposals
Yeah.
would look
This-
a whole lot different, because then you're putting a lot more burden,
This
you know,
would- this
on the
would-
contractor,
Yeah, this is not gonna be a page and a half contract. This will be a
right?
30-page contract.
The biggest challenge is it's probably gonna take a year to write it. To get it written and signed. I mean, that's the reality of it. I don't think anything can be figured
Well, I
out
think you
in
can- I think
2
you can-
months.
You could probably come up with the bones of it pretty quickly. We
The
already
bones.
know what we'd like.
Right.
And we already know lots and lots of things. And certainly through this exercise, we've learned even more.
Right.
And so, yeah, I mean.
So are there any other positives of why we keep a department?
Well, that's why we're here.
Right.
So.
So, question. If our actual, what we're required to as a fire department is to provide fire suppression and MFR, correct? Could be a pro that we would actually really step back and really just invest in those. That's our business.
Right.
And then maybe it could be with the different stations that we have, a resource for revenue for anybody who would like to utilize that. And for example, the ALS. ALS is not our mission as a department, correct?
Correct.
So the ALS, if it's my understanding, and after reading this contract, the burden of that boils down to the city, correct? Okay. So as a taxpayer, and I've said this clearly, I'm now double paying somebody for something that they are already receiving money for. And I don't understand, why don't we flip that and it become, if we have our department and maybe it's, a revenue source that we charge them rent if they want to park their ALS truck here.
Well, yeah, I mean, those are exactly the reasons why we're here. Let's just continue to noodle these sorts of things. And that if I'm hearing what you're saying, then if we go to our number one thing was to meet the minimum standard, meet the mission statement of the township, and then possible lease out the bays to ALS.
Whatever that looks like. I mean, that's just the first thing that I can think of is,
And maybe that might fit better under the hybrid one as we
Okay.
get farther down.
Yeah,
okay,
Put it in both, I suppose.
yeah, it could be.
But I don't, is there any, do you know? Is that an exclusive contract with the city? In other words, if the Smith Brothers ALS ambulance service wanted to subcontract it.
I would think the county would have to, they have to put that out for bids every year or every 5 years, whatever the contract
Well, this one
says.
goes through 2024.
So I would think that, I'm sure if MRS or one of the other huge ambulance services or with Michigan Hospital.
Yeah, who knows?
Wants to
All right.
bid that out, I would think
They-
that
they-
the county would have an obligation, I would think, as a taxpayer. As a taxpayer of the county, I would think they have an obligation if you're gonna spend that kind of money. It's gotta go open, for bid.
That's a good question. I have no idea if they actually got,
Right now,
like,
the city is the only one in the county that's qualified.
Yeah, and
Or in the past.
once again, the county would walk into exactly the same problem if they subcontracted it, and the subcontractor eventually goes,
Walks out.
nah, we're out.
Right.
And so now we revert back to whatever. So none of these things become easy things to do. So again, in the interest of time, I was hoping we could get through all of these, but it doesn't appear as though we will be able to.
Proves once again a very complicated subject.
Oh, yeah. Nobody said this was going to be sort of redesigning the universe.
and Steve, in this particular one, there are clauses in here that describes if one entity or the other wants to get out of it. Just like most contracts.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
sure. And they've probably got a pretty long length. I have not reviewed it in detail. All right, let's keep on track. So the operating our own fire department, I put down as a con is that we're not operating within the current millage, and as a con would be an increased or continued cost of doing business. As and again, I don't really see that as a con. I just see it as a cost of doing business. I want to try to come up with more than just one.
Well,
We'd
that's
have-
two.
We would have, obviously, we would have personnel issues and not
I still have a
not
challenge
good or
with,
bad.
yeah, I still have a challenge with, I have a challenge with the living within the millage. That millage was never designed, and I go back to board accepting millage language that wasn't accurate. So I don't know if that's even a real fair, safe statement that we're saying that we're not operating on. We have never found what a true, I think this exercise has finally realized what our true budget is for this department. I think for the very first time, the exercise has really been broken down. So I have a challenge with it saying we're not living within the millage. The millage has never been accurate. It wasn't when it first went on, and I don't know that our apparatus millage is really truly what we need. I mean, exponentially, the equipment, Dave provides equipment. I bet you they're 2 years old. I bet you those prices of a new fire truck have probably gone up 25% in the last couple of years because everything else automotive has.
Yeah, unless,
So I have a challenge with that being a con, but I don't know how to word it because we are ultimately living outside of our wallet, both as a department and as a township. So I have a challenge of how to word that. Because I don't think we ever intended for back to Dave's point is we've always taken out of the general fund and never really. I get the idea of getting it out of the general fund and truly we have to live within our budgeted means.
Well, I will tell you, and Cash, please jump in on this if you feel I've misstated it. We segregate out the budget department by department by department.
Right.
Keep in mind, the water department is its own enterprise fund.
Correct.
It takes care of itself. So we can essentially set that aside. And so the assessors department, treasurer's department, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. DPW now is very likely to live within its means because it's contractual. And so there are built-in adjustments within that for contingency kind of costs of doing business. And so outside of the DPW and the water department and the fire department, the township operates well within its budget. So even that millage, not including any tax revenue that the state may or may not give us. So from an operational standpoint, we're okay. We can actually set money aside. Would I like to be able to set money into a contingency fund? Absolutely, I would. Has there been one in the past? Nope.
Right.
We don't lease an equipment back to ourselves. We don't lease vehicles back to ourselves. We don't do anything to look into the future. And
that's what's gotten us into trouble.
well,
I mean,
it has,
I mean, that's-
absolutely it has. And so now we look at department by department and we operate within its own means of each one of those departments.
But the township has not said
fire department, you have $1 million to operate your department. And here's your funding mechanisms. It's been, the expenses have dictated what that budget is. Because we're stealing from the general fund, right?
Well, yeah, sadly, we are, because.
Right.
Because
So-
just, so it does have its own budget. It does have its own revenue stream in two ways, the equipment and the operational. So, had there been longer discussions on that,
Right.
and looking well into the future, I suspect that's one of those, geez, should have gone for 3, should have gone for 3.5, should have gone for whatever.
Well, right. I mean,
And
you know,
not just go with, let's not agitate the taxpayer by asking for too much, because
Right.
they'll just say no.
right, exactly.
And so I think that there was probably a little bit of a fear factor put into why we did what we did. I wasn't here at the time. But, and selling something, there's a bit of an art to that too.
Oh, absolutely. So I mean, we have to live within our budget.
Ideally.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
So has the township board specifically said how much is of the budget for the fire department?
Yeah, absolutely, there's a specific department for the fire department, and there's a specific revenue stream for the department. But there's also that line item, I didn't bring my budget with me.
No, right. So, but every year there's been money coming out of the general fund.
Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm.
Is our goal to get that to 0?
Be nice.
Okay.
And
Okay.
To-
So that's my point is we still haven't, I mean, part of the exercise is what will the market bear as far as tax revenue?
Right.
What are the voters thinking? So I just have is the township residents telling us that $100,000 of my total tax revenue is what I anticipate as that general public safety dollar value that's just paid into my regular tax fund? You know what I mean? Because I do feel that part of my general taxes is to provide, county provides the sheriff's department. I don't know how the state police are funded out of our taxes, but it's our money. You know, what is that portion of my sales tax or my property tax or whatever to provide those public safety items? And just is Alpena Township saying that we're willing to, or does the public think that some of those dollars, and I don't know how you figure out what that dollar, is it $1 for every household or piece of property that's taxed should be put into public safety dollars, for lack of a better word?
That's exactly what I'm basically not prepared to talk about it, but that's exactly what I'm talking about.
Okay,
That in a nutshell, it can't be a dollar amount. It has to be a factor.
right,
And so if my taxes are $500.
right. Oh, I want to move to your house.
You need to,
Fine, I mean, just for the township, not my general taxes. But if I have an assessed evaluation of whatever my assessed evaluation is, and if I want these fire services, or specifically fire and medical first responder services, that the formula suggests that out of my assessed evaluation, I have to pay X,
Right, a
Or-
1/3% or something.
whatever the
Right.
factor is.
Right,
Not only what the current factor would be, but that factor moving forward. So that as the assessed evaluation
Right.
of Alpena Township goes up, so does my ability to seed money to appropriate departments goes up.
Right.
If the assessed evaluation of the township goes down, then that factor remains constant. And so that's what I'm trying to figure out as to whether or
Because
not.
right now, we're paying too much out of the general fund, in my opinion, to the fire department to support.
But you see, under this.
that's what
under
we're
this
trying to
fact-
figure out.
Under this
Right.
way of doing things,
It's,
it wouldn't, it would just be.
it's not
it
a
would-
stagnant number, but it's a continuous number.
And it's not one that has to be going back to the taxpayer to fund more.
Correct.
It is
If I improve my house, I get a higher tax assessment.
if
And that-
companies move in, it
Right.
goes up. If companies move out,
It goes down. Right.
And so I don't know exactly how to do that. And I don't know if you can do that. I don't know. And so all along, these are the things that I've struggled with from day one on anything, whether we're operating our own department, whether we're contracting it out to somebody else, whether the ABC nonprofit fire department operates it, whether it's a fire authority that operates it, it doesn't matter.
There's gotta be a,
There's got to be a factor that kicks into this so that everybody's paying a fair share based upon their environment.
right.
Okay, and so that to me seems more ideal, whether it be a 100,000 square foot box store or a 850 square foot home.
So back to living within our budget. I see that as long as we figure out some sort of, I just don't want to take that.
Where's the
that
acceptable break
line.
point?
Right, right. I like that idea of some sort of a percentage of,
Yeah, that to me is that's the only constant,
right.
because it doesn't change, you know?
Right, and then I feel like, equipment needs to continue, well, that's where additional millage, if the township is growing and we need bigger equipment, I mean, we're gonna need buildings, I mean.
Well, there's no doubt about it. I mean, there's absolutely no doubt about it. And all of this exercise, will- these buildings are gonna become obsolete.
You
These
think?
doors are not gonna accommodate a fire truck.
You think?
And all of these things are just gonna happen. And so.
That's
so-
happened.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
already
yeah, it
happened.
is. We have to have a fire truck designed to fit a particular size hole.
Mhm.
We shouldn't have to do that. We should be like the city that gets, hell, we could have a 3-story fire truck back into that baby. And so obviously a con, this is a township wide thing, but a con would be that our physical plant may need to be changed, but it would be a con throughout all of it.
Right.
Whether it was contracted or whether it was our own, doesn't matter. Somewhere along the line, got to either build a new barn or something. And so physical location or physical limitations would be a con of structures.
But doesn't that kind of fall under the increased cost of doing business? I mean, that's an expectation that,
Yeah.
you would have to actually, capital improvement plans and plan for that. So did we decide, is it the one about the not within our means? Is that because of allocated budget or
Absolutely.
millage? Or,
Well,
It's
Okay.
everything.
okay.
Yeah,
Well-
yeah, that's a couple, and you guys already covered it, but I was gonna pop a question earlier as far as us living outside our means because I haven't seen sad state as a department head, but I have seen no budget figures yet. As for example, I'm just throwing some numbers out here because I bet, let's say I was budgeted 956,000 for the last budget year.
Mhm.
How much of that did I go over? Or did I even go over it? I don't see that data. and the reason I'm bringing that up is because when I hear like, you know, you're, well, and I'm drawing this in, may sound a little personal, but Dave, you're living outside your means, or Dave, you're over budget. And I'm like, okay, show me that data. Because I was budgeted X amount of dollars last year. So show me where I overspent so I can adjust my line items. The other thing I wanted to bring up was, actually, Steve, there was an equipment fund for the township in prior years, and I don't know, it was before my time, but it was dropped shortly before I came on board. The equipment fund was eliminated due to increased costs, and there just simply wasn't enough money left over in the budget anymore to put in that, you know,
You mean like
3,000,
contingency fund,
10,000.
you mean?
Yes.
Okay,
The equipment fund traditionally is specifically to, and there was a time in Michigan when certainly almost all fire departments had an equipment fund, but saying God bless California per Proposition 13 and the demise of all fire departments across the United States since then. Equipment funds have went the way of the dinosaur, because a majority of municipalities simply can't afford. And that's why traditionally, as the equipment funds have went away, they've been replaced with, well, I'll use Gaylord, because that's been brought up in the board meetings as a model for how could we, well, when I went over and talked to Chief Dave, and it's like, you know, where do you get all these marvelous toys? Borrow a line from Batman. He's like, we asked for a millage. He said, if we need a new truck, we ask for a two-year 1 mil sunset, and we show the people what truck we want, and they're always approved. And at the end of 2 years, that millage is gone, the truck's paid for in cash. And that's what, but now, but I also see negatives to that, as there obviously is no guarantee that they're going to continue to pass millages like that. But I just, so you guys are aware, when we keep bringing up the general fund in this department specifically, until the year 2018, there was no fire department budget. We were line items in the general fund. The fire department budget was not created till 2018. And my concern back in 2018, when we did that and sorted it out, and we brought to the then board, was we're all in favor of this. We have more control over our spending. It will be easier to track what we're doing, but we certainly hope this isn't going to be used in the next 4 to 8 years as a tool to take this department apart, which we were assured it wouldn't be. Well, now we're 2.5 years into the only time we've actually had our real budget, and here we sit, you know, hanging on to the edge of the cliff. So,
I guess I can't answer that question because I just don't have the knowledge.
well, and I just wanted you guys to be aware of that. It took prior to 2018, we were line items in the general fund, but there was no, this is the fire department budget.
Well, there was
they
a
just-
budget, it was just never added together.
It was
Well,
never line
correct. We
itemed out.
were the general fund. If fire department needs something, that was the old, you know, 100-225- whatever. And in 2018 is when that was, all those 30 some line items were
And I am
pulled out of the
sure-
general fund.
I am sure that's because of wanting to be able to see things very specifically.
Yeah.
And probably required by the state of Michigan.
Do
and
you know-
spending tax
Well, it was, I
dollars.
couldn't believe that they hadn't
Yeah.
had a budget prior to
I
that.
think the other part of it was the software for BSA.
Yes.
Allocated it all out, and it does, I mean, fundamentally, to me, it makes perfect sense that you would,
I'm ticked off that it wasn't done 25 years ago, probably. would-
yeah, I mean.
Well, yeah, in rhetorical question that we can all sit here and ask is how did you operate until 2018 without a specific department
Yeah.
We didn't.
budget?
Um,
So,
The exercises we
want-
did.
one of the comments that I wanted to make, bear with me for a second. I'd gotten an email from Nathan, what the heck that was, that he wanted me to when I had said to, we're gonna meet Monday, and then Nathan sent, because I keep Nathan in the loop. I said, when are you gonna chance to discuss with the city? And I said, well, I'll bring it up at Monday's meeting. Well, obviously the city's here, and I don't, was there an invitation? No, sir. Okay, very good. So what I would propose, I guess, at this point, or at least open for discussion, is one of the things that somewhere along the line we'll want to learn more about is perhaps more specifics about the contractual relationship that the city may or may not offer the township. And so I was gonna suggest that at a meeting in the future, next meeting, whenever, that we invite Chief to come in and talk to us about maybe what something might look like into the future. And I would caveat that to the city that, as you've already heard, the concerns about the agreement. And so specificity would be something that would be greatly appreciated. So does the committee have any objection to listening to a presentation that the city may make? All right, would you like to do that at our next meeting?
Are we ready for that, or do we need to get through the next two?
I mean, personally, I'd like to get through some of these issues, but if we can allocate, how much time do you think you'd need?
That's a question.
Okay, half hour maybe, something like that. All right, so
I think I'm with Chad. I think I'd like to get through all of our pros and cons. That's what our agenda has been
all right, then we're
before
gonna-
we get presentations from other entities.
That's fine with me. Then what I'd like to be able to do is stay on task. In fact, what I would ask the committee to do is to pencil in some things prior to the next meeting, so that we can not bird walk or take the sidetrack somewhere. And so any other discussion at this particular point in time?
The other thing that's becoming very apparent, the sunset on this contract is 30th of June. Yes, sir. What is the township? I mean, are we gonna be up and running? Do we have personnel to be saying goodbye to that contract at July 1?
Not at the pace we're moving.
So the agreement, which you wouldn't probably know because you're not in
Yeah.
the regular loop, is that it is extended a one-time six-month extension. That's what I understand, correct, Chief?
No, sir, there is no agreement. That was part of the proposal.
Oh. Okay, all right, fair enough. There's a memo that hasn't been fully developed yet, I guess, at this point. And so, yeah, we're definitely in a place where we need to push it along.
Expedite.
So I don't know, we have no authority, but there's a couple of real hiccups in the contract as it sits. With some, I don't know that I've got any, but I don't know the contract and I don't deal with it daily. If there's a couple of very specific things that we think our township truly is lacking in this agreement, if we're not able to provide full-time back to a full department by July 1, do we want to make sure that we address a couple of those issues before a contract comes to be needing to be signed again?
I think that'd be prudent.
Yeah, absolutely, it would be.
I don't know that that's in the realms of this committee.
Well,
But somebody needs to
Well,
be
but
bringing
The,
that.
the,
I mean,
the committee can
we're looking at May 1st very quickly.
even though.
ultimately
even
make
though our-
recommendations to the board.
Even though our current job is to come up with these pros and cons, that certainly doesn't mean that we can't get an update on status of employment, and status of training, and status of those sorts of things. I think that that is a very reasonable thing to do, because we don't want to find ourselves a month and a half from now going, oh, geez, didn't see that coming.
And the other thing, I don't want to sign a 6-month contract if we only need 30-day extension. I don't want to be signing and then we have to worry about the out clause and all that crap. I mean, let's be a little bit proactive as opposed to reactive. So
Would you guys like a really quick? I'll try not to be a half. I'll try to keep it to 45 minutes or less.
Yeah.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, we will be
Um,
running out in 3 minutes. Yeah.
If you are not aware, at the last board meeting, it was approved for Michelle reposted job on Indeed. And we received, I believe it was about 15 applications from that posting. I've already narrowed that down to 5. There was a percentage of those applications people put in and they actually had no fire or EMS training. So they obviously were out. There was also a smaller percentage of people that they actually were uber qualified as firefighters, but had no EMS experience and vice versa. I had a couple that were,
So
uber
how many are
paramedic-
hired?
How
Cut to
many
the
are
chase.
hired?
How
Out of
many
those
are-
5, I think is what you're saying.
We
right?
haven't
You narrowed it
interviewed
to
him yet.
5.
These are new.
These are new.
Right, so,
Right.
so how many firemen do we have in place right now today?
4. There are 3 that are dedicated to South and myself that are considered full-time.
So you're out of the equation because you're chief. How many
I'm not out of
firemen?
the equation. I'm,
You will be as soon as we get a full
as soon as
department.
we
So
get
don't-
3 more.
So
Yeah.
don't confuse
Yeah, okay.
you do not count in my world because you're chief. You're backfilling stuff that we need to fill. So Chris has been here 100% of the time.
Yes.
How many new employees do we have on the roster?
2, Luke Meisner and Matt Benedict.
So,
And that fills out the 3 we need to man the one station. To move back north, we would need 3 more.
and the budget says we're 7-person department plus chief. So we are still, it's taken us 6 months to hire 2 people. And they're not running their own shifts yet.
No, they're not. And that's why I said what I did, Chad. I'm still pulling 24s with, because in my opinion, I'm not ready to turn them loose.
About how long before they're loose?
Luke and Matt, I would both give at least another month of 24-hour shifts before I sign off on they've completed their competencies for at least MFR response at a basic level.
So
And
we
to
could-
be able to competently operate.
So just June 1st, we could anticipate Dave going back to chief hours, working chief responsibilities, and having a full 24-hour shift being covered at the south side.
If we move on this,
No, that's what we have in place right now, right?
right?
And it's taken us how long? 5 months?
4.
Let's
You
also
gotta
look back
remember we
at,
had-
we went and they did job descriptions so that there were pieces of those puzzle that drug a little bit. I'm not saying continuous, but there was some that the job descriptions had to go through the board, and that is that's a process.
Oh, I
I'm
realize
discovering.
One last thing, and then I'll turn it back over to you guys, is I have narrowed down in Thursday, Friday, contacted 5 of the qualified applicants. And what I will do after this meeting, actually maybe sometime later in the afternoon, is sit down with Haley and Michelle to schedule the initial virtual interviews with these 5, and hopefully get that done. I'd like to schedule them within this week to be done by the conclusion of next week. And then move that process forward. That's where we're at right now. You guys get tired of hearing me complaining and whining, but a good why. I'd like, again, I want to remind you guys, because we don't have authority as an ad hoc, but you certainly have input to the board. And that is, at one point in time in January, I had 5 openings and 5 qualified candidates, and asked to be able to offer all 5 of those candidates positions, which if I had been able to done that and approved, which means I would have 6 people on board right now that I'd be training up, myself and Chris, and that was denied. I don't know, maybe you guys can.
I don't know that it was denied as more than it was misunderstood. And so at the next meeting, which happens to be
Next Tuesday?
13 tomorrow,
Oh, tomorrow.
we will we'll clarify that. So of these 5 people that you're referring to now, any of them near local?
No, I was gonna say one from Alcona, but no, he was one of them that at this point lacks the a basic EMT license. He's a medical first responder, and I need someone with a basic EMT license to be able to run frontline.
So if we, but if we do just medical first responder, why is that important?
Because that's the level of license we hold with the state of Michigan. We're required to put at least one basic EMT on scene.
That
at
we
dispatch right now,
presently have.
That we presently
Yeah,
have.
weren't we gonna alter that?
We did. We were transporting, which
Oh.
meant we had to put 2,
Okay,
which was taxing the stations when, because we only had, and remember that I was giving you the scenarios where,
yes,
say Bruce would be up here and the tones would drop. And if another basic didn't respond from home, then whoever was at the south side would have to empty south side and come and assist Bruce. When we dropped down to non-transport, the state relaxed that requirement. Now only requires us to put 1 basic EMT on scene, so that once we get back to having both stations, that firefighter can run by himself to an MFR scene. We will no longer need to be pulling.
There is
And we are
level-
looking
There
at
is one level below for basic first responder.
MFR.
license.
Yeah,
that's basically where the suburban with a kid could.
Right. That's where all the other townships are present.
that's where they are.
So back to our pros and cons, I mean, we could drop our licensing 1 more level to the state. If we only had basic EMT, basic life support or basic.
MFR,
MFR.
which is all
as
we're,
opposed to basic life
which is
support.
my understanding is, which is all we are actually
Right, that's the
required to
mission.
do. What
Right.
we have been doing
Is
is
objection.
above it.
Right, exactly. Okay, next Monday again?
Yes.
I'd offer it up sooner, but my schedule this week just doesn't allow that. But what I would like to maybe consider doing Monday is maybe if our calendars will permit it, to maybe have 2 next weeks. We gotta keep pushing this thing.
Yeah, we gotta get,
And
June
again-
30th is coming
Yeah.
very, very, very fast.
All right, and again, your homework will be to try to fill out as many of those pros and cons as you can, so that we can avoid trying to noodle it up in a 45-minute period. If there is nothing else for the good of the order, and guys, from the city, I will be in touch with you.
Let me just add one real quick, and we'll add it with the others, but for a pro, for our own department, our tax paying money stays in our local budget. It's not given to a third party entity. Did I say that correctly, Cash? Does that sound right? Okay. Monday.
We are adjourned. I just want to shut that thing off.